This is Memorial Weekend. Isn't freedom awesome? Freedom is the most amazing thing. We get to do whatever is right in our own eyes. Wait, whoa, hold on. Did I hear something? You know, it is interesting when you think about it. The very thing that we yearn for is the thing that can get us in the biggest trouble. Young people, I see you out there. I'm glad you're here. Can you imagine what it would be like to have complete freedom? Kind of like summertime, except better. No school, you don't have no homework, you don't have to get up early in the morning, all that good stuff. You get to do whatever you want to. Wouldn't it be nice if we could even add to that, you can eat whatever you want to? Woohoo, man! Marshmallows for breakfast, ice cream for lunch, pizza for every meal. I'll tell you what, freedom! I can play whatever video games I want and go do whatever I feel like doing and come home whenever I feel like coming home. Wouldn't that be the life? I can vaguely remember many years ago when I was young and I wondered that very thing myself. You know, why can't my dad be one of those really rich dudes? That I don't have to go to work in the summertime and make money. And some of you get a nice, really old car when you turn 16 to drive. I didn't even get a car. I was halfway through college and had to buy my own $500 10-year-old full of rust car. Yeah, those were the days. But I often imagine what it would really be like to rule my own life and I wouldn't have parents tell me what to do. When I get older, I wouldn't have a wife telling me what to do. When I get older, I wouldn't have kids telling me what to do. And when we think about real freedom, we start to realize, I'm not going to name any names, but there was a young person that came here to church early today, and they had only been here for 15 or 20 minutes, maybe a half hour. And I said, good morning. And they said, good morning. I said, how you doing? And they said, I'm bored. It's 9:30 in the morning and you're already bored. Isn't that true, teens? You get on summer vacation, you're out of school. Maybe you get a week. Probably, I almost guarantee you, parents, they won't even last a week. Let me know. Less than a week, they're going to come through the door and they're going to say, Mom, I'm bored. Summer vacation, you're finally out of school. No homework, you don't have to, and you're bored. Yeah. Sometimes freedom isn't all that it's cracked up to be. And it was during this season that it is used, the phrase is used, Pastor Jim may refer to it several times as you go through the book of Joshua. They did what was right in their own eyes. Because there was not some rulers watching over them. They didn't have cops at every corner doing speed traps to make sure you didn't speed. They didn't have school police around making sure that you didn't sneak out and do whatever. No. They lived at a time, maybe one judge, and in all of Israel, he wasn't going to judge all the corners of Israel strictly. He had no police, he had no enforcement. So people were really, let's back up one more step. They had just spent 400 years in slavery. They couldn't pick their nose without permission. And I'll tell you what, I am so grateful and thankful that I was born in America and grew up in America. Have had the privilege to visit a couple of other countries. And the countries that I visited, some are, technologically as advanced as we are, and some have certain freedoms, but I don't know that I've run into any country that compares to the United States, and I love and enjoy the reality of living here. But what I have learned is freedom as the end goal is not what you want. Now, you heard Ashlyn read from Judges chapter 2. I'm not going to take you back through what she already read to you. I may come back and refer to it for a moment or two, but I want to jump ahead to the time of Jesus, the time after Jesus, when the church is just starting to grow. And now we had the reality that because of Jesus' death on the cross, because of his defeating sin, we had the privilege of living in the freedom of forgiveness from God. And what a wonderful thing it was. I'm going to read a passage to you out of Romans chapter 1. It's a passage that many of you are familiar with. So if you want to start turning there, turn to Romans chapter 1. Because I want to read a passage that kind of reflects and compares to what we just heard about Judges. And in American freedom, there is the opportunity to make choices and run wild if you wish. Nobody can tell you what to do in a certain sense. And more people are out there saying, I will live life my way, and you can't tell me what is right or what is wrong. I will determine that for myself. Join me in Romans chapter 1. This started happening even back at the time of Christ, and we see it developing as much if not more so. In Romans 1, it started with verse 8. For the wrath of God is revealed against all ungodliness and unrighteousness of men, who by their unrighteousness suppress the truth. Now let me stop there a second. Okay, we just heard this whole thing about Judges and how horrible it was and how gruesome it was, and you're sitting there going, what is this? What is this, all this negative and horrible and gruesome and yucky stuff, and now God is their choices. Now, before we get into these choices, I kind of wanted to use an illustration. There was this farmer that had this nice plot of land, and he was going to grow some crops and raise some cattle and have some chickens, and it was going to be awesome. And so he built this chicken coop, and he fenced it in so that the coyotes wouldn't come and disturb the chickens. And then he had this half of the farmland fenced off so that the cattle could come in and eat the grass and roam in that field. And then over in this field, he plowed up the rows and planted the corn and the cabbage and all the other good stuff that was there. And one day, the chickens come to him and they say, "Farmer, it's not fair. I mean, you do give us good grain and all that kind of stuff, and it's not that we're not thankful, but I mean, we're fenced in here. We can only go this far. We look out our fence and we see out there where the cows are roaming around, and we see over here. We want to tear down the fence and give us our freedom. That's going to make a better farm." So the farmer reluctantly tore down the fence and gave them their freedom. The next morning he came out, but instead of finding his chickens, he found some feathers laying on the side. And a coyote did come and get the chickens. They had their freedom. He gave them their choice. The fence wasn't to pen them in. The fence wasn't to make their life miserable. The fence was there to protect them. And the cows weren't kind of paying attention, and they started to complain to the farmer the next day, and they said, "You know, we don't like this big fence that you have down in the middle of the property here. We'd like a little more freedom to roam. All we get is this grass that's over here." So the farmer takes down the fence. He comes out the next morning. His cabbage is destroyed. The corn is all eaten and torn down. The cows had made havoc of the whole growing area. And while their bellies were full, that was the end of their eating, because the farm was finished. God does the same thing for us. So let's continue reading in Romans. Verse 20. But verse 19. "For what can be known about God is plain to humanity, because God has shown it to us. For his invisible attributes, namely his eternal power, divine nature, have been clearly perceived ever since the creation of the world, in the things that have been made. So they are without excuse. For although they knew God, they did not honor him as God or give thanks to him, but they became futile in their thinking, and in their foolish hearts were darkened. Claiming to be wise, you know, that sunset may look beautiful, but God didn't paint that. You know, those mountains may look majestic, but God didn't put them in place. You know what really happened? We're smarter than all of that. And we know that way back in the beginning, some big explosion just happened, and things just on their own nature took over, and animals came out of the soup, and the planets started to cool and went through different kinds of things, and we sort of evolved to where we are today. And if we just hang on, artificial intelligence is going to help us to evolve to something even greater. Verse 22, claiming to be wise, they became fools and exchanged the glory of the immortal God for images resembling mortal man and birds and animals and creeping things. Therefore, God gave them over to the lusts of their hearts, to impurity, to the dishonoring of their bodies among themselves, because they exchanged the truth about God for a lie and worshiped and served the creature rather than the Creator who is blessed forever. Amen. Do you see it all around? Young people, you go to science class, you're going to be challenged to say, you know, those fairy tales that you've been told in Sunday school are a bunch of malarkey. They're not science. They don't make up any sense at all. We know a better way. You know, even recently in Saucon Valley, they've launched a Satan Club. And in that description, they say, we don't believe in Satan because we don't actually believe in God. We don't really believe in anything supernatural. They really should call it the Humanity Club, because what they're saying is we believe in me. I'm the pinnacle. I am the top of it all. I call all the shots. And that's what we want the kids to know, is they are on top of it all. And they know everything. And they can figure it out on, and they have all the potential on their own. They bought the lie. And then it goes on to say in verse 26, for this reason God gave them up to dishonorable passions. For their women exchanged natural relations for those that are contrary to nature, and the men likewise gave up natural relations with women and were consumed with passion for one another, men committing shameless acts with men and receiving in themselves the due penalty for their error. Can I just stop for a minute? If you simply took that one little paragraph out and did not tell somebody that you're talking to that it's from the Bible, and you just said, would you explain this paragraph to me? What's it talking about? What would they say? They would say it's talking about homosexuality. It's talking about men having relations with men, women having relations with women. That's what it's talking about. I've had many people come up to me and say, the Bible never talks about homosexuality. You know, if you look up in Strong's Concordance, the word homosexuality isn't going to come up. But that doesn't mean the Bible doesn't talk about it. You can't get, it doesn't use the word, it uses the definition right here. You go to Webster, and you look up the word homosexuality, it will say the gender having relations with the same gender. So it is talked about here. And God didn't tie our arms and say, you can't do it. But that doesn't mean that God says that it's good and right. And our culture has come to the place today where, probably very much like back in the days of the judges, everyone does right in their own eyes. And nobody can judge them for it or call them for it. And we're quick to judge the nation of Israel and say, why didn't they follow God? Why were they so stupid? What was wrong with them? Could God say the same thing about the church in America today? Could God say the same thing about us? I've heard believers that talk about why are we so concerned about whether some of these gender issues are wrong nowadays. Do we want to walk down the path that the rest of the world is going? Do we want to take right and call it wrong? Do we want to take wrong and call it right and embrace the opposite of God? We have the freedom to do that, just like Israel had in the days of Judges. And they got themselves in such trouble that God had to send them judges who would stand up, who would declare truth to the nation of Israel and charge them to follow God. And they would repent and they would turn around and they would follow God. I'm going to finish this in Romans, verse 28. And since they did not see fit to acknowledge God, God gave them up to a debased mind, to what ought not to be done. They were filled with all manner of unrighteousness, evil, covetousness, malice. They were full of envy, murder, strife, deceit, maliciousness. They are gossips, slanderers, haters of God, insolent, haughty, boastful, inventors of evil, disobedient to parents. Oh, they threw that in there in this big, horrible list of simple little disobedience to parents. Sorry, young people, it's there. It's in that list. And adults, so is envy and what was the word I just skipped over? Gossip and slander, boastful, inventors of evil, faithless, heartless, and ruthless. And though they know God's righteous decree that those who practice such things deserve to die, they not only do them, but give approval to those who practice them. Israel lived in freedom. And God only sent judges not to judge them, but to rescue them. And God has given us his word and showed us truth, not to pen us in and make our lives miserable, not to force us to sit on this side of the fence looking at the good stuff that the worldly people have and saying, why can't I have that too? But because he wants better for us. Jesus taught and showed the way and encourages us to follow it. He does not browbeat us. He does not shake his finger and say, if you don't follow me, I'm going to strike you. No, life will take care of that. If you jump off the roof of a building, gravity is going to take charge. And if it's a roof that's this high, there's a good chance that your body is going to bear consequences from jumping off that roof. You're free to do it. I don't advise you to do it. Oh, you're just being judgy. You just don't think I'm tough enough. You just think... No, I think science shows you're going to break something. Jesus came along, and if you want to turn to Matthew, that's kind of where we're going to end today. In Matthew, and that's at the beginning of the New Testament. Judges is easy to find, right? Near the beginning of the Bible. Matthew is the beginning of the New Testament, which is halfway through the Bible, but because the Old Testament's bigger, it's more than halfway. So you get to the little books, the little prophets in the Old Testament. You get into Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, you went too far. But in Matthew chapter 5, and we're not going to spend a long time in this, we're not going to read all of it, but it's just going to review with you. Jesus came along, and he said, whether you were thinking Old Testament like the judges and the time of the Israelites, or whether you're thinking of your future and the start of the church and what things are going to be like going forward, truth is truth. And Jesus said, these are the things that matter. He says in verse 13 of chapter 5 in Matthew, implying this statement before the verse starts. If you are a follower of me, if you want my benefit, if you want my perspective on life, then understand that you are the salt of the earth. What in the world does that mean? You know exactly what that means. Do you ever have chips without salt? You ever had steak without any seasoning, any salt on it? Did you ever, even vegetables? Yeah. Broccoli that's just, steamed or boiled, with no butter, no seasoning, no salt. You ever have that? I love broccoli. Don't give me broccoli unless there's at least some salt or something to put on it. We, as followers of Jesus, get to be the salt of the earth. The rest of the world is groping for a good steak, for a good baked potato, and it's just tasteless. And it's like, and then we come along, and our lifestyle following Jesus is like shaking a little salt. And they look at us and they go, "Whoa! How come you're so happy? How come you're so content? You're not a millionaire. You're not the healthiest guy in town. You're not the sharpest chip on the block. But yet you're still having a great time. What is that?" We get to be salt and light because we're followers of Jesus. Look, Jesus himself in the next paragraph, verse 17, says, "Don't think that I came to abolish the law." Oh, freedom! We don't have to obey any of the rules. We get to make up our... No. If we're going to follow Jesus, we got to know right from wrong. We got to follow right. Is following right easy? No. It is a whole lot easier to follow wrong. You know exactly what I'm talking about. But I'm old now, and I've learned a few lessons in this long life. And you know what I've learned? I've learned when I do it right, I get along a whole lot better than when I try to take shortcuts and mess things up and do it wrong. Jesus knew what he was talking about. He goes down in the next paragraph and he talks about anger. The Ten Commandments say, don't murder. Nobody in this room has ever murdered anybody, right? We're all good people. If you're walking around with grudges, or if you're walking around with jealousy, or if you're literally walking around, I can't stand that person, and that's your attitude, you're disqualifying what God wants to release and flow in you. Let go of anger. Let God take care of their problem. Let their problem be their problem. Don't make it your problem. Lust. We don't have any adulterers in the room. We don't have anybody that's been unfaithful to their spouse. Except when you ladies look at this really cool guy that has his act together, and you look at your husband and you say, why can't my man be like that man? I'd rather have that man. Then all of a sudden, Jesus says, you've committed adultery. Don't go doing that kind of comparing. And men, exactly the same thing. Divorce, as hard as it is, as ugly as difficult as it is to be, and divorce happens, but I think Jesus is saying you got to do everything and say, they made it easy. And our culture makes it easy. Everybody does it. And many of you have gone through that, and some of you have come to the place where you've acknowledged that was wrong, and that was take an easy way out and a shortcut, and I shouldn't have done it, as hard as it was. And he talks about oaths and and retaliation. He talks about loving your enemy in chapter 5. Loving your enemy. Ooh, that's a hard one. He talks about giving to the needy. Now, not only does he say give to the needy, he says do it in a way that nobody knows. Don't get credit. And I would add this principle to go beyond, way beyond giving to the needy, helping anybody out, doing a job for somebody. Have you ever done a good deed for somebody and they didn't thank you? How do you feel? You know how Jesus said you're supposed to feel? You're supposed to feel fine. No worries. I didn't do it for you to pat me on the back. I didn't do it for you to say, attaboy. Jesus says, do it in secret. If it's possible to do it and they don't even know you're the one that did it, then you're starting to shine. And he goes down further and he says, in chapter 6, verse 19, I'm going to paraphrase that verse. Don't try and get the biggest bank account in the neighborhood. Don't try and finance the biggest and fanciest house around. Don't go out and get the nicest, latest car. Don't worry about being the best and the most advanced with all the gadgets. Don't think that if you put enough money away, you can retire early and enjoy life at the age of 40 or 50. No. Invest in missions. Invest in ministry opportunities. Invest in the Lord's work. Invest in things that are going to bring about eternal consequences. And I'll finish this as a paraphrase, verses 24. You can't outgive God. If you're wondering how to feel safe and secure, don't pad your budget. Don't pad your bank account. Don't try to make sure that you are financially secure. In the end, there's this old phrase, when we die, the one with the most wins. And my question has always been, if you die with the most, what do you win? Yeah, you can't take it with you. I think what's a better phrase, and be a paraphrase of Jesus, the one who gives the most away in the end wins. Again, because you can't take it with you. Uh-oh. We need to stop there. We can't go to the rest of chapter 6. No. My subtitle there at verse 25 says, don't be anxious. Are there any anxious Christians in the room? Want to put your hand up and admit, don't put your hand up. Come on, you can't admit it. Jesus says, don't be anxious about your life. Stop it. If he was here in person and he honestly said, who here today is anxious? I'm going to heal you. And you raise your hand. You know what he would do? He would go on and slap you in the face. He'd say, stop. Stop. Haven't I provided everything you need? Haven't I taken care of it? This is the cool thing. Do you know that despite all the worrying that you did this past week, none of you looked starved to me? And you're actually here today, and you're dressed up in something nice, and you probably drove here in something that works. Seriously? What did all that worry this last week provide for you? And yet God provided. Food, clothing, transportation. He took care of you. Jesus has a better way. No, it's not always easy. No, it means there are rights and wrongs, and we need to pay attention to the rights. But you know what's cool even about that? When we mess up, what's he do? Cuts us off. Slaps us. Lightning bolts us. Says, hey, take this. You messed up. No. He says, hey, mess up. Come and tell me about it. And if you confess it, meaning you agree with God that what I did was wrong. Don't rationalize it. Don't come and say, well, but you don't understand. No excuses. Just say, God, I was wrong. I'm sorry. What does he do? 1 John 1:9 says, because he's righteous and true, he forgives you. And he doesn't only forgive you, he cleans you up and puts you back out there and says, try again. And I know, I struggle with this. We can take advantage of it. But again, I let truth handle it. I don't worry about it. Some people say, I don't like this bit about, he forgives and forgives and forgives. That way we can just wallow in doing wrong, saying I'm sorry, going back, doing wrong, saying I'm sorry. But isn't it true that when the disciples looked at him and he challenged them, how many times should you forgive each other? What did he say to them? How many times? And when you multiply that, what's that come to? 400 and what? 90? Thank you, math people. So, if somebody comes and apologizes to you, if a fellow Christian comes and apologizes to you, you have to forgive them 490 times. Now, if you keep track and they sin 491, you don't have to forgive them. That's the point of it. The point is, you're not going to keep track. And yet, Jesus himself said, how many times will I forgive you? Some of you say, I've already passed that 490 mark. Well, the good news is, his point was, I'm never not going to forgive you if you come to me and ask for forgiveness. Is that better than living in freedom? To know that the one who created you, the one that is helping you climb towards rightness and trueness and goodness, isn't going to cut you off halfway. He's going to forgive you. He's going to help you up on the next step and keep pushing you forward. Folks, we can live like the Israelites and live in our freedom and do our own thing. We can live like what Paul wrote to the Romans, like culture today, and call our own shots and do our own things. Or we can do it Jesus' way. It's not total freedom. In fact, it's slavery of a different kind. Jesus says, unless you sell out for me, you're not part of me. But again, now that I'm an old man, I can tell you that selling out for Jesus whole lot more fun and a whole lot easier than wallowing in my freedom and messing up and living in my consequences. And as a pastor, I have counseled enough people along the way to know that their mistakes only reinforce what I say. Let's do it Jesus' way. Let's find the hard path. Let's follow the narrow path. Let's do what Jesus told us to do. And you know what? You're going to love life 1,000 times more, and you're going to be salt and light. As culture wanders through a dark place, you're going to be, follow me, I know the way. Because you got the light. And you are the salt. That's what Judges is going to teach us over and again. I hope that we make the right choices. We have the freedom to make the wrong choices. But if we make the right choices, God will take care of us and Jesus will honor us. Let's pray. Father, you love us. We're grateful for what you've done. Jesus, we think sometimes it's hard following you, but wow, that doesn't hold a candle to what you did for us to make us free in our relationship with you and free from the consequences of sin. And I pray that any person here today that has not been following you will make that choice today. Will say, hey, I'm a sinner, I've done wrong. Jesus, I need you to save me. I want to follow you. If you make that decision, he will make your life amazing. Not easy, not a millionaire, not painful stuff, but through life, you will find greater peace and joy and purpose by following him. Ask him. Trust him. He will do it. Thank you, Jesus. In your name I pray.